That actually worked out perfectly because the mic ran out of battery life between the time I turned it on this morning and the time I was getting up. So they gave me time to change batteries. And is it on? Is it still from here? Good. All right then. So that worked out perfect. First of all, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy holiday weekend. And with that, let's look at the subject, repaired, from Jeremiah 19 through 20. 19 through 20. My memory's bad enough. I don't need any jolts to the system before I got to get up and talk. So that's going to be my excuse if this comes out all wrong. But we're talking about the subject repaired this morning because as I was typing things up for the study guide and various notes, sometimes you head in one direction, but you realize, wait a minute, we had a situation along the lines of what I was talking about. And so I had to change some things up. So it became obvious that we have in our lives times like we just came through fire season. We have a family that was blessed to be able to repair some of the damage that was done to their place. We are going to see this day in Israel's history. However, they are running out of time to repair, and they are coming into a season where repair is no longer going to be an option. And so in Jeremiah chapter 19, God is making a shift from, as we saw in Isaiah, talking about those 2 days, the days of rejoicing and then the day of accountability. Here Jeremiah has been talking about there is still time in the day of accountability to create an environment where you can still make repairs without having to make wholesale changes. Now they're entering in chapter 19, a time in which he's going to tell them the time is running out for repair. As we begin in verse 1 of chapter 19. Thus says the Lord, go and buy a potter's earthenware flask and take some of the elders of the people and some of the elders of the priests and go out to the valley of the son of Hinnom at the entry of the potsherd gate and proclaim there the words that I tell you. You shall say, hear the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. Behold, I am bringing such disaster on this place that the ears of everyone who hears it will tingle, because the people have forsaken me and have profaned this place by making offerings in it to other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers, the kings of Judah, have known, and because they have filled this place with the blood of innocents. Verse 5, and have built the high places to Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come into my mind. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place shall no more be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. Verse 7, and in this place I will make void the plans of Judah and Jerusalem, and will cause their people to fall by the sword before their enemies and by the hand of those who seek their life. I will give their dead bodies for food to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the earth. Morbid stuff for a holiday weekend, right? However, it's even more morbid when it once again is talking about stuff I can't relate to. We've already talked about the ways in which if we just look at idols as stuff, this is going to seem really remote. More importantly, now we're talking about the temple. Why do I care about the temple? It's, as our brother said, he wants to go visit Jerusalem and touch the Wailing Wall. You want to know why they call it the Wailing Wall? Because the temple's gone. It's no more. Why does it relate to me as a Christian? Well, it doesn't relate to me until I understand what they're doing here. What they've done is, as opposed to simply building the high places where they could offer up sacrifices, and as we talked about idols, were simply an opportunity to change the narrative, to make God whatever they wanted. Now that has become the thing that they're doing in the house of God. Simple lesson you've heard over the years. Over time, I guess I said it this week in the short lessons. Older, wiser preacher once said, the thing about sin is it typically takes you further than you want to go, keeps you longer than you want to stay, and costs you more than you want to pay. And so the sins that they were committing all over the nation of Israel have now found a home in the temple. And the idolatry that he was saying you don't need to take part in at all has now found a resting place. Why does that matter, Marcus? Why does that matter for me? It's because if you understand back in Isaiah chapter 4, he had dedicated this nation to become, as I said over and over again in the short lessons, exemplary. Exemplary. And I've drawn a fine line, almost splitting a hair between the concept of being exemplary and becoming an example. If you got kids you work with, You know the difference, we say it from time to time, of a kid you are happy to see in uniform or in a different perspective, on graduation day, on the day of their baptism. All the different times when your kids make you proud. That's exemplary. Oh, but you know of an example as well. Why? Because they don't just come out that way. And every now and again, to get them to exemplary, you got to make some examples. Like me and this microphone again. I was going to tape it, but here we go. I was really going to wear a shirt. Okay, that's my issue. I don't have a good example for microphones falling, so there we go. We'll just have to slow down. And so understand that likewise, over time, it's not you so much making an example to kids that you hope will one day be exemplary. Sometimes you got a kid you got to make an example of. Why? Because you've got more than one. You work with a group. You got folks who've been working with kids over the summer. Hopefully discipline isn't a huge issue. But sometimes you can save the entire group if you can make an example of one or two at the beginning that this is not the way for us to go. We're going to have a happy day. Let's just have a fun summer, right? Summer's over. I want to pick on my brother and sister who've been working with the kids at the Boys and Girls Club, but it's happier when they're just having fun. But sometimes discipline is an issue. And that is the distinction we're seeing here with God. He is saying, Israel, you have the right to do whatever you want. But understand the choice as to whether or not you're going to be exemplary, something I'm proud of, I'm saying, look at that one. Or something I'm making an example of is up to you. And now they are entering the years of being an example. Why? Specifically because they have repurposed his house. It is now a place where the thing that was true, the living God, the one who brought them out of Egypt, has now been replaced with fiction. And so understand why it matters to us. Because even today, he has called us to be, when we talk about let your light shine, if you are looking for, use it all the time. Let's take it out of the realm of opinions. I want to get me a new iPhone. I want one that's reliable. If the person, brother talked about going overseas, talked about one of the differences is the housing's a little bit different. Not everybody can afford choice housing, right? That's a thing we see here in the States, but it's way different even in the third world, which is why Mark goes to build homes for people, because that's just not a normal thing that everybody gets, right? As easily as we would have it here, even though it's getting more and more difficult. Understand that over time, those difficulties affect integrity. That's why it's so difficult to live over in parts of the quote-unquote third world. Because you know from the just from examples here, one of the things I got a better appreciation of when I was living there was the examples I heard out of the Holocaust, which is the way in which the camps brought both the best and the worst out of people. You got to see people who were willing to sacrifice on a completely different level when death was at their door every day of the week. They didn't necessarily know whether they're going to have enough food to eat, and anything they said could get them shot or put in a chamber or could make it their last day. And so that caused some people to cut corners on integrity and throw other people under the bus so they could have another day. That exposed a lack of character. But others were still willing to sacrifice themselves rather than lose their integrity just to save their life. That brought out the exemplary side of character, and that's what I've seen poverty do. Poverty brings out both that exemplary side of character, people who are willing to go hungry another day just to maintain their integrity, and people who will cut throats just because. And what do you think Christianity looks like, or evangelism looks like in that environment? I've talked about it before. I had to go buy some bikes for some young people because our kids had to walk to school. These are college students, right? They're in a preaching school. These aren't high school kids, and they're still having to walk because the car is a luxury there. And so understand, we're going to buy bikes. I hate to break the news to you. 2 different businesses. One was literally a Christian business. Didn't say Christian Brothers over the top, but it was one of the people who came recommended because he had a relationship with the Christian school I was working at. But then there was this Muslim business across town. Of course, we started with the Christian business. We didn't care to check prices. But what happened was we ended up getting sold a used bike at new bike prices. And I'm the American. I don't speak the language fluently, but I can check prices. And what happened was we could not. I'm going to talk like this the whole time. We had to stop doing business because we were in a crunch. We had to get one bike for one kid, but we used that as a test for when we went over to do business with the Islamic family who ran a more successful store. And it didn't take me long to realize why they ran a more successful store. because they sold me new bikes at new bike prices. Actually, at a new bike price, I don't want to make this up, but I think it was cheaper than the price we bought the new rusted bike at. And so understand, in a situation where you can be under pressure to cut corners, you can't evangelize the same way if you're not telling the truth. And so that's why God is commenting at this point. When you're repurposing his temple, you are literally replacing the truth for a lie. And fundamentally, that's the practical thing that goes along with why he's saying, don't repurpose my spaces. Because you're in an environment where people have a hard time finding what's true. And if they're walking in to keep company with you and all they're hearing is a different spin on the truth, they can get that anywhere. I know I beat the dead horse. But understand, I'm preaching it again because it's chapter 19. I've been with you since Psalm what? And it's coming up over and over and over again. And so that's one of the cool things about just preaching through the Bible is you get to see the things that matter to God. And please hold me accountable for this because I keep forgetting to mention it on Wednesday night. I've been cheating folks who've been here on Wednesday night out of the best experience, one of the best experiences I had in preaching school. It was we had this class called Justice, Mercy, and Righteousness. I was like, when do we get to the Bible classes? I came here to learn the Bible. And the first assignment we had was I need you, this was back before we had, all the gadgets on the phone. Well, we still had phones, right? But they weren't as nifty. He said, I need you to go do a word search on 3 words. Want to guess what they are? Justice, mercy, and righteousness. And I've been preaching through Isaiah, intending to mention it every week. Now we're getting our way through Jeremiah. I'll keep intending to mention it on your own time. Even if you don't study with us on Wednesday nights. Look up justice, mercy, and righteousness. And just understand, my very first sermon here, I remember it because it was called Foundation. It's because you can learn a lot from the Bible by understanding the type of literature you're in at any particular time. So when you see concepts that start out in the law, they carry forth into the wisdom literature, into the prophets, and on through the ministry of Jesus, those, I'm going to call those biblical fundamentals. And so when you look up those 3 terms, God willing, if you have time, justice, mercy, and righteousness, those are the 3 fundamental things God is saying need to be found in his people if they are truly going to be the light that God has called them to be. And the very beginnings of the book of Jeremiah start out a lot like Isaiah, where he's not going through the whole law, we mentioned it before, of this is everything I told you to do. No, it's like a diagnostic examination. When you go into the doctor, he doesn't tell you everything. Matter of fact, when the doctor, not too long ago, they're like, okay, Marcus, what do you want us to test for? We're talking about testing, right? Because they could test me for a million things, however many things that could be going wrong with my body, but it's more effective if they are able to hone in on areas of concern. And that's what the prophets are doing. They're the period of Israel's history where God is honing in on the recurring problems they're having over and over and over again. They're taking them from the days of repair into the days of rebuilding. That's the phase of life that they're entering into. And so because they have repurposed his space out of a place that is dedicated for pure truth. I don't mean just understand, okay, like I was using the phone illustration. It's easy for me to go get a phone. True story, though. Okay, I'm going to try to tell it 100% true, but you know how telling stories get, right? I went to go get my phone repaired. I don't remember what was wrong with it, but I knew by then that you can't just leave your stuff and expect it to end up in the same circumstance it was when you got back, because people are hungry. And if they see something nice, they're going to, And so by this time, I already knew, but I was getting toward the end, and I was tired of not trusting anyone. And so I wanted to make sure that this man knew I was going to pay him right off the bat as a sign of trust. Just treat me right, I'm going to treat you right, right? And so as I was leaving my phone with this man, I saw the expression on the faces of the people around him, and I already know. But I'm going to let him do whatever he wants to do with my phone. I'm going to make it clear that I'm going to pay him the same either way. And whatever he does with it, that's up to him. That's between him and God. So I go back and get my phone. This ain't it. Because by the time I go back and get my phone, hey, you guys know on the iPhone that cool button right here that like turns the phone on, it makes everything work? It pressed, but it didn't work anymore. That wasn't the issue I had. And so sure enough, I take the phone back in. I'm like, brother, this wasn't broken when I took it to you. I'm going to need you to look at it again. I'm going to go ahead and give you the money. I think I went ahead and paid him. I know I went ahead and paid him before it was over. And I need you to just honestly fix my phone. And so sure enough, as he went back in the phone, the little piece that connects the main button to the rest of the phone to make it work, all of a sudden got repurposed because he fixes phones by the side of the road. Because, you're right, I should have called up the Apple. They don't have an Apple store, you know that. So your options are limited. You got to trust somebody, right? And so that's what's going on. Same thing, just like I told you the bicycle story. That's strike two. You think there were no conversations about Jesus going on? One of the reasons why I picked where I went is because it was one of the most quote-unquote Christian nations in the area. I could have gone a nation over where I started, but that was literally a formerly communist nation. And I usually don't care about the politics of it all, but with communism came atheism. And you could see the difference. And so we're like, we're neighbors. Let's set up camp in the Christian part of the world and then evangelize the atheistic part of the world. You're getting it twisted, buddy. It sounds Christian, but is it really Christian if you can't trust the integrity of the people in the quote-unquote Christian spaces? And so I'm telling you, that's one of the reasons why it's difficult. Jesus said himself, if they will do these things when the leaf is green, what will they do in a dry season? And so understand, that's a dry season. They're perpetually living in an environment where they don't have. I told you the $2 a day thing is not a lie. It's real. It puts pressure on you to compromise your integrity. But understand something else. When I was talking to somebody else about coming back from the mission field, and I'm literally talking about writing, like my brothers, just put out a book, right? And we have other folks here who have written books. I was talking about, okay, how can I shift my voice to fit an audience? He's like, don't shift your voice to fit an audience. You be you, and the audience will come to you. Because you have a problem or potential of, and this is just a secular person, you have a potential of watering down the quality of your work to try to fit an audience you may never reach. And so ultimately, he helped me understand, like I said, I'm old, I forget why I even mentioned that. But the bottom line, what I saw was, because I'd make trips back every year, and even though that was the level of integrity I saw in the Christian third world, as I began to make trips back and forth, I saw the gap closing between the integrity that we consider third world integrity and the level of integrity we consider to be first world integrity. And do you think that's gotten any better since I've been back? No. It's gotten worse. You know it. I've had conversations with folks who have trouble finding people they can trust just to do day-to-day business with on a daily level. And so from that perspective, one of the things that God is calling his people back to do, it's not just cheer for God. He doesn't need us to cheer. I've said it before. He doesn't care. The cattle on 1,000 hills are his. What he wants us to do is live the kind of life that actually gets people out of the binds that they're in and shows them that things can be better. If you can carve out a society where people can actually trust one another. And that's what he's doing in repurposing the temple. In telling them and warning them about repurposing the temple. Paul himself will say that the idols are the carved wood, the carved stone, that's nothing. It's the way that it's impacting your character. It's the change in you that it's carving out that concerns God. And by the time we get to see Paul talking about idols, it's going to be the same thing. And so by the time we move on in this verse, like we said, chapter 19, verse 5, it's going to talk about the second thing. They are not only going to have been repurposed, they're going to have been refocused in verse 5. Verse 5. Into verse 4. They filled this place with the blood of innocents and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal. Please don't lose the distinction there. He's talking about the blood of innocents and burn their sons. That could be completely synonymous, but there could be a distinction there. I'm going to ask you, I'm not doing this every week up until election season. I'm going to preface this by saying, don't interpret anything I ever say as a call to vote for anyone, okay? You vote for who you want to vote for. You associate with whoever you want to associate with. Please don't let people who do not share the values that God has called you to carve different shapes into your character, though. And the reason this concerns me is this. Everywhere I've been since I came back from the mission field and before has basically caused a level of confusion with this whole concept of the innocents. Why? Because this whole concept, when I first read it, I first thought, I'm going to just tell you, this is what I thought. And I tend to stay away from politics. Abortion. That's the first thing that came to mind. I'm not going to lie to you. But then what happened was I started to look at the term as it's actually used in the Bible. And that is the danger that I saw. If me reading the Bible every week, nerding out on the Bible all the time, the only thing I could see in the term was abortion, then what's the effect it's having on everybody else? And as much as I'd love to just stay away from all this, we need to look at some verses on what this blood of the innocents thing actually means. So please do me a favor. 1 Samuel 19:5. 1 Samuel 19:5. First context I saw was in in the life of David. In the life of David, where the verse reads, "For he took his life by his hand and struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause?" Who do you think he's talking to, and who's talking? It's the priest interceding on behalf of David against Saul. The first time we'll see him interceding on behalf of someone who is offering up their life potentially as innocent blood is someone who's about to lose their life as an individual who stepped up as a hero on behalf of the nation, but it's getting him nothing but grief because now his life is in danger as innocent blood. It's not going to stop there. It's going to go to the prophets. Jeremiah 2 verse 30. "In vain I have struck your children." This is God talking about how he has disciplined them, trying to get them to turn from the day of, or the point of no return. "They took no correction. Your own sword devoured your prophets like a ravening lion." Chapter 2, verse 34. "Also on your skirts is found the lifeblood of the guiltless poor. You did not find them breaking in, yet in spite of all these things," he's going to go on to talk about the fact that they still hunted down the blood of the guiltless poor. Jeremiah 26:5. "Only know for certain that if you put me to death," Jeremiah talking about himself, "you will bring innocent blood upon yourself and on the city and on its inhabitants. For in truth the Lord sent me to you to speak all these words in your ear." And that would be one thing if it is Marcus spouting a whole bunch of Old Testament verses, but like you say, Matthew 23, let me just set the context for you. That's Jesus on the eve of his own death, going down the list of woes that he is giving to the nation, and in particular, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes. And he is concluding with one of these, talking about righteous blood in verse 34. "Therefore I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar." Understand, why is that important? Because Marcus is just trying to make some random point? No, because they were actually committing murders in the temple. And the one reason you don't want to confuse these two terms is he is talking about, we started off talking about the valley of what? The valley of Hinnom, and how these sins had crept from the outlying areas into the very temple. And so they were doing at least two different kinds of killing, because the literal killing they were doing in the temple was the killing of the messengers, or even, quite simply, David wasn't necessarily under threat in the temple, but he was under threat in the king's house. And so you got two different kinds of killings that are going on. It literally says you are killing your sons and daughters. So if you interpret that as, abortion's wrong. Just be flat out say it. It's killing is killing. But that's exactly the thing that God does not want us to get stuck on. He does not want us to, as we said, overcompensate in valuing one type of killing at the expense of another. Why is that? Because ultimately he is calling us to be accountable for this whole thing called justice. When we said the justice, mercy, and righteousness part, the one reason why it's so important to understand why you need to understand the core principles, the fundamentals, is as he begins to get into Hebrews chapter 6. And he says, okay, no longer laying a foundation of repentance from dead works, baptism, salvation, and all those other things that you know you have to do. These are fundamentals. I need you to grow up into maturity. And if you don't have the fundamentals down, you will never grow into what he's saying you are supposed to be as a mature Christian. And the reason that matters is this. If we neglect justice in a Bible that over and over again calls us to understand justice and mercy and righteousness, terms like innocent blood will be way too easy for me to redefine according to my particular perspective. And that's the problem. Like we said, it's not like I'm bubble free. Like I told you the lesson last week about gossip. I told you a story about who was gossiping. Go on, say, thank you. You pointed out. I didn't point somebody else out. I pointed me out. And I talked about an embarrassing story I had when I was gossiping behind a teammate's back in college, right? But the thing is, I don't want to go that route again. And likewise, if we are going to grow into maturity, that is the thing that he is calling us to understand. You will not fully understand these more complex terms, these more nuanced terms that he's talking about, like nuanced blood, if you completely dismiss the issue of justice. You're going to see it from your perspective. And here's the thing. We are not operating in a bubble. Like I said, good thing about got a new phone now. My phone is my new opportunity to create my new religion. Because as I said it over and over again, the thing that my phone or my friends give me the opportunity to do is I don't have to think so hard anymore because I got bubbles that are going to define for me what innocent blood really is. And understand, I come from a perspective where I'm one of the best things I ever heard from a preacher by the name of, you've heard of T.D. Jakes. Takes a lot of grief, but I can't lie. This is where I heard it. He's like, we all tend to have a soft spot for people who sin like us. And so when I'm thinking of innocent blood, I'm thinking of people who are situated in this culture like me. It's not like I'm immune from the tendency to draw the bubble too narrowly. And that's one of the reasons why I don't get permission to dismiss the core values that Jesus is saying you need if you're going to understand what I am truly trying to get you to understand. That's why I say, please, God willing, I'm not doing this every week. I'm just asking for a little bit of permission to talk about things that affect, vote for whoever you want. Just don't let them change your character. Do not let them reshape you into the image of their rhetoric. Do not let them reshape you into the image of, you don't know them. I don't know them. I wouldn't ask you to vote for me as if you knew me. If I wanted you to, thank you, right? If I wanted your vote, God willing, I'd be honest enough to say, you don't know me. You don't know my struggles. You may be able to see some of them. But I'm trying to come to you as an humble person who's got flaws. And like Charles Barkley used to say, I am not your role model. I'm not a big fan of Charles Barkley, but I am a big fan of that disclaimer because you need to basically be able to draw a distinction between, like we said, as we march toward November and the lasting impacts it's going to have on your character. Vote for whoever you want. If you want to know how I vote, I confess. Here, where's Rick? Rick ain't here this week. Ask him. I told him the whole thing. This is who I voted for, and this is because I'm like, look, I'm not one of those people who's scared to tell you who I voted for and why. Why? No, I'm too far. I don't usually vote. I'm one of them. I'm one of them. You really got to do something to get me off the couch. And so why do I do that? Why? Because if I look hard enough, I'm going to find something wrong with all of them. And here's the thing. I don't want them impacting my character. And so I never want to lose my ability to look at them with clear eyes because I got too much of a dog in the fight. So you'd be probably shocked at some of the people I never voted for. Ask me. I'll tell you in private. But it's because I have to retain my credibility as a preacher. That when I'm talking about truth, it's not because I'm trying to get you to vote for somebody. I've got a definite interest. I'm not going to lie. But I need to be able to criticize everybody who's lying and steering people of God away from who they need to be. And that's why I'm asking you for just a little bit more indulgence. I don't plan to talk about this all the way through November. But every time I see it come up in the Word, I'm a coward if I don't talk about it. And I'm not trying to die a coward's death. Because like we talked about, in the Revelation, that first group of people who don't make it in, it's the liars, Marcus, it's the liars. No. It's the murderers, No. Said it before. The first group of people who don't get into that new thing that he is creating, it's the cowards. And I know what it's like to be a coward because that's what I was born. It's not Mama's fault. Mama's got courage. But I was a scary kid. And just like that backbiting, I didn't want to be a backbiter no more. And I didn't want to be a coward no more. So it's one thing if I can talk to you, somebody who always had courage. I didn't. And there are plenty of places you'll be able to find in me right now that I'm ashamed of, and I'm still scared of stuff. But ultimately, the point is we come here so that we can grow out of whatever it is that we lack into what God is trying to transform us into being. Why? Because the cost is high. The cost is high. As we go on toward the end of the chapter, God willing. Part I left out. Let's just please skip to verse 10. Then you shall break the flask in the sight of the men who go with you, and shall say to them, Thus says the Lord of hosts, so will I break this people and this city as one breaks a potter's vessel, so that it can never be mended. Thus the distinction between repair and rebuild. See, what happens is he is telling them that the destruction is going to be so great. Well, what is that? How much sense does that make, Marcus? You see people living in Israel right now. Is Jerusalem uninhabited? No. But understand they had to rebuild it. And go to the prophets, the smaller, the minor prophets, and look at the reaction that they had to what they were able to rebuild. At one point it says some were crying, I think it was in the days of either Ezra and Nehemiah. It seems like they were crying out of joy because they were just able to lay the foundation and get that far. That's how much it meant to them. Just to get the foundation. You know what the foundation is like? I got a chance to go see my brother's home, and I drove right past. I said, this can't be the right house because it's not. It was, but they got the foundation laid. And I know they're appreciative of having the foundation laid. They were crying when they had the foundation of the temple laid because of all the work that it took just to get that far. Can you imagine what it would have been like if they didn't have to rebuild? If all they had to do was dedicate a portion of their workforce to repairing? And that's what God is consistently trying to get. Like I say, don't trust me, trust Hebrews. Maybe read Hebrews as a companion to the Old Covenant. Just chapters 3 and 4, and then maybe chapters 6 and 10. Because I told you, those are the chapters that those who believe you can't lose your salvation, if they could tear them out of the Bible, they would. And why do I say that? Because historically, those were the chapters that they tried to get out of the Bible as never should have having been included. Because it did not reconcile with the belief that you can't lose your salvation. And so ultimately, that's another passage that's freshening up this message for us. The book of Hebrews is saying, do not neglect. It doesn't say don't ignore, don't reject Jesus. It says don't neglect your salvation. Because if you neglect it, you can get to the point where it's no longer a repair job. It's a rebuild. And here's the sad thing. You don't know if you get to rebuild. You'd be like, well, God's made some pretty cool promises for those who their work is tested by fire, but they're gonna still survive and be saved. But it's just their work that's gonna be destroyed. Why does that not matter? Chapter 20, verse 1. Now Pashur the priest, the son of Immer, who was chief officer in the house of the Lord, heard Jeremiah prophesying these things. Then Pashur beat Jeremiah the prophet and put him in the stocks that were in the upper Benjamin gate of the house of the Lord. The next day, when Pashur released Jeremiah from the stocks, Jeremiah said to him, the Lord does not call your name Pashur, but terror on every side. For thus says the Lord, behold, I will make you a terror to yourself and to all your friends. They shall fall by the sword of their enemies while you look on. And I will give all Judah into the hand of the king of Babylon. He shall carry them captive to Babylon, and shall strike them down with the sword. Moreover, I will give all the wealth of the city, all its gains, all its prized belongings, and all the treasures of the kings of Judah into the hand of their enemies, who shall plunder them and seize them and carry them to Babylon. And you, Pashur, and all who dwell in your house shall go into captivity to Babylon. You shall go, and there you shall die, and there you shall be buried, you and all your friends, to whom you have prophesied falsely, taking us back to square one. The thing he is getting out of the territory is the dishonesty. He is rebuilding on a foundation of truth. Pashur's not going to get to come back. So if he's listening to all those prophecies and say, oh, it's just 70 years, at least I can make it right for my descendants. He's saying your kids aren't going to get to go back, bud. And so when we're looking for, like we say, a foundation for different principles of what Christianity is, one of the reasons why I don't believe in the fact that I don't believe in the belief or the doctrine that you can't lose your salvation is because every example they refer back to talks about a portion of people who go so far they either never make it into the promised land, wandering around the wilderness, or once they make it there, they get kicked out and they don't get back in. Because God is trying to rebuild with a completely brand new foundation. And it's not just the years coming out of the years of the captivity in Egypt. It's not just rebuilding after the captivity. Like you said, you're going to have a complete shift. You're no longer going to be known as the people coming out of Egypt. You're now going to be known as the people who are coming out of the dispersion, right? The remnant. And Jesus is going to use the exact same metaphors when he says, straight is the way, right? Narrow is the gate, straight is the way. And how many find it? Thank you. Who was Jesus talking to when he was making that statement? Oh, he was out talking to the Gentiles. You know better. He sent people to the Gentiles. His ministry was to his people in Israel. And all these ministries, all of these statements, all of these examples are God not talking to the world, not talking to non-believers. It's God talking to his people. That's what scares me. And that's why I ask you to indulge me in begging you to stay away from everything that would conform you or reshape you into some image other than God. Because ultimately you are the light. And you have every right to determine how God uses you. You just heard it from the wisdom literature. We just don't get to control how he uses us. We make the choices, and he makes the decision as to whether or not he considers us exemplary or an example. And with that, somebody help me fix this for the holiday weekend. You got it? Okay, right? Put a happy ending on it for me now, right? You can do that with AI, right? No, don't mess with AI. I'm just AI frightens me. But really, y'all. High note. When Paul is saying some of these very same things, if you believe that Paul is the one who wrote the book of Hebrews, he talks about all this condemnation, like I referenced in chapter 6 and 10. He says, it is a fearful thing to fall in the hands of the living God. The book is literally called Gentiles? No, sorry, the book is called Hebrews. He's literally talking to Hebrew believers, warning them about the danger of falling away. But he says, I have confidence of better things for you. And so God willing, if there's any word of encouragement you can take from this holiday weekend, God willing, we all from one another, I have a hope, or I'm confident in better things for all of you. I'm not great at reading faces. Sometimes I can read them. And I'm not great at reading behavior, but sometimes I can read it. And over time, I haven't been here for very long, but I see people who are willing to listen. And so that's a good thing. Because it can always be worse. No matter how bad it looks, it could be worse. And so as Paul said, as he's preaching this tough stuff, or whoever wrote Hebrews is preaching this tough stuff, I have confidence of better things for you. But as we said, all the way back in the early days of Isaiah, we will not be saved on our own terms. As we together stand and sing.